In today's episode, I'm going to break down why your ROAS is lying to you. That's ROAS stands for return on ad spend, and what's the key metric that eight-figure brands are actually tracking to create sustainable and predictable growth in terms of income and impact. And I'm going to really showcase how important tracking the right metrics are by sharing with you what happened a couple of months ago when I was working with an eight-figure brand. So the company was making about $18 million in annual revenue. They were spending about, $450,000 per month on paid advertising. And they were getting collectively 4.2 return on their ad spend. So the executive team was really happy. The founder was happy. The marketing team was getting praise for amazing performance, but they were seeing diminishing profits. The margin was really shrinking. And they were kind of confused as to why that was the case. And so when I came in, the first thing which I did was really to look at contribution margin by acquisition channel. And what I realized is that the paid social advertising was operating at a negative 12% negative ROI, which that's like negative contribution to the margin. So every single dollar of revenue that was attributed to the paid advertising was costing them $1.12 on the back end in terms of cost per acquisition. And the platform ROI looked great, but on the back end, those return, were not translated in the margin. And Meta, Google was claiming here credit for email-driven purchases, for organic brand purchases, for direct referral purchases. And the attribution model of the platform was crediting the last touch point of the purchase to the platform itself. And it really created a situation where they were not able to really assess which platform was actually driving the growth for the company. And they kept on spending, but because they were not looking at the right data, they were not seeing the return on the back end. And that's typically what I see a lot when I work with eight-figure brands that want to scale to multiple eight-figure brands, where they are spending a lot on advertising and they're kind of confused as to why their results are shrinking and their profit are just literally vanishing. And the very first thing which I want to address in this episode is that your ROAS, which is your return on ad spend, what does that actually measure? So your return on ad spend, what is it actually? It's defined by revenue attributed from an ad platform divided by the ad spend. So when you hear someone say, okay, I've gotten a 4x ROAS, that means that for every dollar spent, they got on the back end, or the platform was reporting on the back end, $4 made. Now, the problem is not the math. That's the simplest part. The problem is the word attributed in that definition, because attribution is not neutral. It really depends on the platform that you are working with. For instance, if you are working with Meta, you have there a 7-day click or a 1-day view attribution window. What that actually means is that Meta claims credit for any purchases that comes through within 7 days of someone clicking on your ad, or within 1 day of them actually seeing your ad. So even if they haven't clicked on it, which actually means that if one of your prospects saw your ads on Meta as they were scrolling on their Instagram feed, and they got an email, maybe they're already in your list, they got an email reminder on Wednesday, they Google your brand on Friday, and they finally, bought on Saturday. What happens is that Meta get full credit because it happened within that 7-day window. Google is going to attribute that sales to their platform as well. The same happening for your email. And here it looks like everyone is winning, but on your P&L, what happened is that you actually kind of see ghost revenue that's been inflated here. And this really creates a reality where the sum of all of those channels, your ROI is going to look really good, but in reality, that's not going to be the case. So what you actually want to do is realize that ROI is your ROAS is a metric that makes every single platform looks like your best channel, but it's also the metric that's most likely to lead you to double down on your most expensive acquisition source. So how do you actually avoid that from happening? You first want to stop relying only on your ROAS, but look here at what I call your marketing expense efficiency ratio. So your MER, marketing efficiency ratio here, which really measure here your total business revenue divided by your total marketing or advertising spend. So it's blunt, it's simple, it's straightforward, it gets you clarity that you need to take decision that really moves the needle. And here it really measure what matters at the business level, which means, okay, how much revenue are we generating for every single dollar that we put on marketing? Full stop. End of the story. That's what that's what we want to understand, because unlike your ROAS, your MER cannot be gained. You can claim cross attribution credit, you can inflate it, if you run, for instance, if you spend, for instance, $400,000 on ads, and on the back end you make $2.4 million in revenue, okay, my MER here is 6x done, end of the story. And so companies that are in the multiple 7 and 8 figure level that I've worked with, that we've been able to scale the most profitably and the most sustainably, we really focus on optimizing for the MER, because we know, okay, that's the truth ultimately, and we want to make sure that we're making decisions based on the real data, so that we are not ending up with a P&L that looks worse than when we begin working with the client. And what I really advise you to do, and that's what we do with our clients, we run the MER reports every single week. We review that alongside of the P&L to see if there's congruency within those numbers. And when the MER drop, we investigate, okay, which channel is currently underperforming, what specific action should be taken to improve the return on ad spend and the revenue and the profit on that platform specifically, which campaign should be scaled up at a higher level, because those are actually the ones driving most of the revenue. It really allows us to, instead of spending, hours looking at campaign dashboard and trying to, triangulate what we can do to improve, so it allows us to have really clarity and visibility in terms of what's the next best course of action to really drive profit efficiently and immediately for the company. And the next level that I actually invite you to even dive deeper when it comes to looking at your metric and driving growth for your company is your LTV CAC ratio. Your LTV here means lifetime value of your client, and your CAC means your cost of acquisition. Because the reason why you want to go one step deeper, if you really want to scale in a way that where you preserve your profit, is the limitation with MER comes from the fact that it's backward looking, which means that it tells you how efficiently you acquired revenue in the past, but it doesn't tell you whether or not the customer that you're actually acquiring are really valuable in the long term. And ultimately, as a company, you've probably heard this quote 1,000 times or a billion times, is whoever company is able to spend the most to acquire a customer is going to be the one that ultimately wins. And some is not a typical thing that means that, okay, I need to spend to acquire the customer upfront. But the company actually win long term, understand that it really comes down to how able you are to retain your customer for the long term, but also upsell them in other product services that you might create down the line, and really get that customer, for years, months, months or years, ideally. So here you really want to, if you want to avoid getting hurt at scale, you want to build an acquisition system, an acquisition engine that generates clients that are high value as time goes by. So I'm going to share with you one of the biggest mistakes that I see when I come in a company and I'm hired as a fractional CMO to help them get to the next level. I typically see a situation where they build an acquisition engine that generate them cheap customer, and they attract those clients and they're really happy, but those clients never come back. Maybe they haven't gotten a good experience, or sometimes the system on the back end was not really properly designed to retain those customers and send them as they stay with the company. So those customers, they got in, they never come back, they never buy anything else. And the economic look great on the front end, month 1, month 2, everyone is happy. But by month 6, by month 12, the core data tells a very different story. And by looking at your LTV to CAC ratio, it really allows you to understand what's the ratio of a customer lifetime value compared to your cost per acquisition, your cost to acquire the client. So it's the metric that really allows you to separate sustainable growth from growth that's eating itself. For instance, a healthy benchmark that you want to aim at once you make this calculation for your own company is to have at least a 3-to-1 ratio LTV to CAC, ideally higher at the 12-month mark. And what I mean by 3-to-1 means that if I spend $1 to acquire a client, that client lifetime value is going to be equal to at least $3 within the first 12 months. That's what you want, because it means that you're actually acquiring a customer at a profit. If you're in a place where you are at a one-on-one ratio with LTV to CAC, it means that you are actually breaking even on the front end. So when you add in all of your costs, payroll and software and all the expenses that come with your business, you are actually losing money. And that's what happened a lot with clients, where they're spending a lot on marketing and they're wondering, okay, why things seem to look good on the front end, but we are barely able to sustain payroll. I'm barely able to pay myself. What's the missing link? Typically, when I dive deep into those company, I realize that either the MER is completely inefficient, or the CAC or the LTV to CAC ratio is incredibly low. And so also we should also want to have in mind is the payback period, which means here how many months it takes for you to recover your cost back buying a customer. And so it's like, if you, for instance, you have a CAC of $200 and your monthly contribution per customer is $40, your payback period is 5 months. So you need 5 months for you to actually recover how much you spend into to get that client. And it's a number, this payback ratio, or the payback period, sorry, is the single number that most accurately determine whether your business can afford to grow as fast as your ambition wants it to. Because if you spend a lot of time to recover what you spend on acquisition for client acquisition, it means that you are not going to be in a place where you have thick enough profit margin to aggressively scale. And those are three key metrics that you really want to have in mind. And I'm not suggesting here to stop looking at your ROAS completely. It's useful as a directional metric to really understand, okay, how within a single platforms are we actually able to drive growth, especially if you pair your ROAS and if you track your ROAS using a third-party platform like, iROAS, Triplewell, or, Weekend Report. Those are amazing tools that you can actually use. I advise against just using the backend reporting, the dashboard, if you're spending more than $6-figure, $100,000, or if you're spending more than $10,000 per month on ads. I highly suggest using a third-party reporting tool. But beyond that, you also want to look at those benchmarks, the MER, your LTV to CAC ratio, and your payback period. I highly invite you here to track your MER weekly. That's, at the total business level, understanding, okay, that is my primary signal. If my MER drops significantly, investigate immediately, regardless of what the dashboard of the platform shows you. Next, you want to run a quarterly cohort analysis to really know exactly at the 30, 60, 90, and 120-day, 180-day, what does our LTV looks like. Looking at your customer acquire for each major channel and how much are those actually bringing you compared to how much you've spent to acquire those customers. This really tells you if your acquisition system is improving or deteriorating as time goes by. The next thing that you also want to look at is really understanding your true CAC monthly, which means not the blended, but by source. How much does it cost me to get a client on Facebook, vs Google, vs YouTube, vs TikTok? If I'm running ad on TikTok, vs LinkedIn, it's really paramount for you to understand how much it costs you to acquire a client by each platform, and which platform is actually driving the best client based on their LTV for your company. And then really understanding, okay, what's my contribution margin? You can run like a contribution margin waterfall to really here evaluate each channel performance and so that you understand, okay, by revenue size, what's the contribution margin to the health of my business. If you have these matrix in mind, it's really going to allow you to have clarity, and clarity is paramount if you want to scale your company in a way that's sustainable and that's predictable. I see so many founders that are in a place where they are working really hard in their company. They've scaled it to a significant level. They've crossed that 8-figure threshold mark, but still they feel like they're still stuck. They're still stuck in the hamster wheel, where even though on the front end, the revenue looks amazing, they have those big numbers, on the back end, they are literally gasping for air. They are barely able to sustain the company. They are really stressed out because they have to keep on powering to keep that engine going, and they feel like they're not getting on the back end, enough money to keep even keep the engine going, and having those metrics in mind, not just looking at, okay, we've got this big number, we've got this huge ROI from the back end of the platform. It really allows the conversation to deepen, to really get down to what truly matters and what truly drives growth, so that you can scale in a way that's predictable, that's profitable, and that's a whole lot more peaceful. And companies that build their growth strategy on platform reported ROAS, typically they are making capital allocation that are based on the number that has been optimized. So they are looking at, okay, well, here's what we have on the back end. We're going to keep on optimizing it. And they always end up in that hamster wheel because they're not really going deep. On the other hand, found a company that really outperform their peers and have a competitive edge at the $10 million mark to the $50 million mark, are universally better at looking at the numbers. They're not just like looking at more data, but they have clarity in terms of which data actually reflect the business reality. Because let's face it, when you look at your dashboard, you have tons of numbers to look at, and it can be quite overwhelming. And it's easy to just pick one and be like, oh yeah, this looks good, I'm going to focus on this one. That's what you don't want to do. You want to ask yourself, okay, is this number really an indicator of the growth that the company is currently having, or is it not? And if it's not, let's find out, let's triangulate the truth, and let's focus on what really matters. If you want me to come and look at your numbers, help you really drive growth for your company, that's what I do all day, every day. I work with companies that are in the $3 million to the $10 million mark, and they want to scale their impact, their income to the next level, scale beyond that 8-figure mark, while keeping solid profit margin and really keeping their sanity. If that's you, make sure to look in the description of this episode. There's going to be a link for you to fill out an application form, see if you qualify for an audit called a revenue growth session, where we can, see what you're up to, what your next milestone growth goal looks like, and we can, work together to understand what we can put in place to drive better growth for your company. I am Joly Tematio. I run Hogan Consulting, and I really specialize in helping high growth business build better acquisition system that's really drive not just profitability for the company, but to also bigger impact for the community and for the world at a larger scale. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. It was a pleasure to record this video for you. If you got value from the episode, make sure to leave us a review wherever you're listening to the podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to like the video, subscribe. It means the world to me and to the team. I'll catch you on the next episode. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, never stop investing in yourself. Take care. Bye.